man, individual, a very capable individual with an enormous fighting spirit for his convictions. So once again, I apologize that I must take off in the middle of all of this. Enjoy yourselves and make sure that you take away with you at least a little shard of that character, that unique character, energetic, sometimes very difficult. Half the time I find it difficult to understand what he's saying. That's by the way. Just take away, however, a shard of this little phenomenon encapsulated in the personality, the achievements, and the career of the celebrant, Rotimi Amechi. Congratulations, many happy returns. Thank you very much.
To a great extent, if I offer him advice and he doesn't like the advice, he does one of two things. He tries to avoid me for a couple of weeks until he has had his way, or he just keeps his distance, and I will understand fully why he is doing that. But on many occasions, he actually listens to me. Now, when he told me about the subject of the lecture, I said, okay, fine. But I fully realized that the subject or the topic fitted into Rotimi's political DNA. He fights the good fight, and his DNA is, he has a fighting spirit any day. And I think everybody who has come to know him understands that. Therefore, when he told me that he wanted me to talk about and democracy and all that, I said, okay, fine. I'm going to adjust it and just talk about democracy and the poverty republic, because I think we live in a poverty republic, because the number of poor people in Nigeria has in the last 2 years overtaken the rest of the population. So, and we have graduated, we have even overtaken India as the poverty capital of the world. Therefore, I feel comfortable talking about democracy and poverty. Then I had another problem. I asked Rotimi, I said, what makes you think that I qualify to give this lecture? He said, no, I just do it. So, but I reminded him that in today's Nigeria, you need to fulfill certain criteria in order to qualify for people, all these important people here, to be listening to you. In Nigeria, if you want people to listen to you, it's either you are a pastor and a imam, but in addition to those two, you must also have a lot of money to buy that audience. I don't think I'm either a pastor or an imam. In addition to that, if you want Nigerians to listen to you, you must have a lot of money. The hope is that after your lecture, after your talk, you will leave something behind. But unfortunately, again, I don't belong to the class of the wealthy. I have spent all my life working in two of the most underprivileged professions, teaching and journalism. If you want to retire as a poor man, join any of these two. If you also want people to listen to you for their own good, you better be a politician. You know, politicians thrive on audience, and they do get it. On the other hand, you can be a traditional authority. to a traditional authority, you get an audience. Unfortunately, I'm not a chief. I don't have a chieftaincy title. There is a more dangerous and creeping category of speakers who get an audience, whether you like it or not. They are in the social media. In the social media, these days, you turn on your phone in the morning, somebody is giving you a lecture. They call them power speakers. They call them. These are dangerous because they are communicating to you or with you directly, one-on-one, on your phone. You cannot escape. If it was a large audience like this, you can decide to walk away. But if somebody early in the morning wakes you up and talks to you on your phone, you probably have no choice. You have to listen. What we talk about is democracy and poverty. What is the relationship? Now, whether we like it or not, democracy is a function of choice. The choice of the people about who governs them, who rules them. Who governs or who rules them. While poverty has to do with access to resources. The farther you are away from the source of resources, the poorer you are. The nearer you are to the source of authority and power, the more you are privileged in the democratic terrain. But both of them are linked because those who seek power through democracy always need the population. And most of the people, you can conscript them to vote for you, but majorly, if there is no empowerment, if there is no prosperity, you cannot have democracy. And if you take the history of democratic transition all over the world, it is the same thing. It is the empowerment, the economic empowerment, the liberation from poverty that produces democracy. If you take Europe, after the Industrial Revolution, the Industrial Revolution produced wealth, produced prosperity, produced a middle class of workers. It was this middle class of workers and workers that rose to challenge the kings. This is how Europe made a transition from monarchism to popular republic. In other words, once people were working, they were making money, they realized that they had the power. And why would the king and the queen be ruling over them? So what happened? You had all the popular revolutions. They beheaded the kings, they dragged the queens by the roadside, they overthrew the monarchy, and empowered popular parliament. Instead of kings, they began to have prime ministers and presidents. Where the kings fought a rearguard battle, they say, okay, we can have a ceremonial monarchy, but real authority and government must come from the people themselves. Therefore, the point I'm making here is that economic empowerment, economic power, the conquest of poverty is what enhances the rise of democracy, not the other way around. Now, if you look at Africa, just broadly, because we don't have a lot of time, you will find out that in Africa, it's the other way around. Colonialism bred an elite. The elite decided with the colonialists that democracy is the best form of government. So they set up parliament, built a state house, and promulgated the constitution, and went out to recruit the people to vote, to form parties, and set up democracy. So it's democracy from the top. It wasn't that because people have become rich or become prosperous that they opted for democracy in Africa. As a result of this, out of 54 African countries, only 20 can be described as minimally democratic. What has emerged in the world is that these two concepts, democracy and poverty, or poverty alleviation, have come to dominate. In the world, people are choosing different forms of democracy. You have different versions, the diversity of democracy. We all know the American one and where it has currently led. We know the European one, which arose as a result of the Industrial Revolution. But China also, you have something else that has arisen in recent times. They call it illiberal democracy. It's democracy because people troop out periodically to go and vote. But it is not free. If you are in Russia, Turkey, Hungary, a bit of the Philippines, you also live in a democracy. And in theory, you decide who rules you. But I'm not so sure whether Mr. Putin will respect your right to vote when it's time to vote in Russia. But he might not respect your right not to vote for him. The same thing with Viktor Orban in Hungary. The same thing with the man in Turkey. So that's illiberal democracy. Yes, democracy, you are free to choose your leaders, but you must choose me, not the other man, or woman, as the case may be. Now, in the Nigerian instance, the Bureau of Statistics recently, I think it was a year or 1.5 years ago, decided that it was not just enough to define poverty in terms of people who live on $2 a day or less, that it should be liberalized. And they came up with multidimensional poverty. In other words, poverty should be measured in terms of access to education, access to food, access to shelter, access to money, access to power, and so on and so forth. But the result they got has put us in trouble, because when it was $2 a day, the population of poor people in Nigeria was about 85 million people. But with multidimensional poverty, when they put in people who have no access to all the essential things of life, Nigeria's poverty population ballooned to about 130 million out of roughly 200 million. What does that mean? It's frightening. What it means is that the number of poor people in Nigeria has now overwhelmed and overcome the rest of the population. So we are now living squarely in a poor republic. And no matter what economists say, the multidimensional poverty is more scientific, it's more realistic, and the simple logic is that if you are living in a country where the rate of population growth is faster than the GDP growth, then your highway to poverty is assured, and Nigeria fits squarely into that. Now, this thing that they call poverty, people gathered in this assembly may not understand it, they might even wave it off. But some of us who grew up from poor background understand that poverty is not a joke. It doesn't joke about its effects. It afflicts people, it leaves scars, it invades and ravages and dominates and pervades whole segments of the population. It also conquers territory. Poverty conquers territory. Because if you check Abuja and Lagos, for instance, you find out that places that were started and established as highbrow have in recent times been overwhelmed and overtaken by slums and ghettos. So poverty conquers territory, but it conquers territory in its own peculiar way. But more importantly, it also dehumanizes people, reducing them to virtual animals. A poor man, has a different set of feelings. Now, whether we like it or not, poverty in Nigeria and a good number of other countries now has national security implications. We are seeing a different type of crime. We are seeing the persistence of criminality. We are seeing kidnapping that won't go away, abductions that will not go away, armed robbery that won't go away, banditry that will not go away, no matter how much you provide in your budget. The children are poor. And they have found out that the easiest way of fighting their own private poverty is to hire or buy a gun and overwhelm the person who is frightened. So you will live in a frightened republic. I'll give you a practical instance. In the eastern parts of the country, annually people go home to touch base with the neighborhood. And when they go home, their little cousins and nephews and brothers who do not have as much depend on them for handouts. So if you live in the town and you are doing well and you come home and you have 10,000, 5,000 or 50,000 to give to people and share, you are spreading a bit of welfare. But in recent times, those urchins in the village, those people who are unemployed in the villages, they wait for you. You are coming home, all right? Fine, you come home. They arrange and kidnap you. They say, well, let's kidnap him and ask for 20 million because ordinarily he was going to give us only 10,000 naira anyway. So it's better and more profitable to kidnap a wealthy uncle and get 20 million or 10 million instead of waiting to collect 10,000 naira. Simple. So you see the effect of poverty on even social cohesion. And that is why I come from a part of the country where you have so many mansions and palaces. The owners don't come home for 10 years or 15 years, as the case may be. Why? They are afraid. So we live again in a republic that is ruled by fear. So, having said that, I'm not going to speed up what I have to say. Now, poverty has become so pervasive, has also become a legacy. Because when we were growing up, it used to be that you need to send your children to school so that they can conquer their poverty. But now, whether you send your child to the best schools or not, they're not going to find a job. They probably won't find anything to do. So poverty now negates poverty. Poverty has become a legacy of so many people. And some parents, some poor parents, go and borrow money in order to educate their children. They find out that having educated these children, they graduate, they cannot find a job. The parents have impoverished themselves in order to train their child. This child will not be capable of attending the burial of the parents. So this is where we are. So what we have done is our democracy is gradually redefining itself into something like a government of the poor by the rich for the rich. Government of the poor by the rich for the rich. Now, having said that, the political industry, politics in Nigeria has emerged as an industry, what we now call political industry. And it is one of the fastest growing industries in our country. It's not manufacturing, it's not trading, it's either politics or criminality. Those are the fastest growing industries in our country, criminality and politics. The political industry is very straightforward. The entry requirements are very lax, very little regulation. If it says you need school certificate, okay, go and get school certificate. If you can't get school certificate, go and swear to an affidavit. If you cannot swear to an affidavit, go and buy an illicit certificate. You are qualified. You can borrow money. So you will see that we are in the city of Abuja. I know some people who 5 or 6 years ago used to travel to Abuja by night bus. Today, some of them cannot even fly first class by air. What they do is to either buy or hire a private jet, because the rate of prosperity, the return on investment in the political industry is the fastest in any industry that you know, because it defies all logic. And because it is so attractive, people are ready to kill in order to win an election. They can rig to win an election. They do anything to win the election. And so politics has now weaponized our poverty. Our poverty has been weaponized. People, politicians, when it's the election time, don't waste your time. It's either you share money, buy votes, or distribute what they call stomach infrastructure. Stomach infrastructure means giving people bread, giving them little money, giving them something that they can make. In fact, in one of the states, they say, look, if I can just get from the politician enough money to make one pot of soup that is good, because throughout the years, they find that there's no food. So, now there's the political industry. But something positive has happened in recent times. People now know that the politicians will give you little money and they will win and they go away. For 4 years, they won't come back. So people collect stomach infrastructure and refuse to vote for you. If you check the last 2 state governorship elections in Edo and Ondo, we witnessed the lowest voter turnout, in spite of the fact that the voters were outnumbered by security, official security. The voters were outnumbered by the money that was dished out. People collected stomach infrastructure and stayed back in their houses. They refuse to go out to vote. So Edo State witnessed 22% voter turnout. Ondo had 20%, the lowest since 1999. So you may think that poor people are stupid. They are getting wiser. In conclusion, let me just read bullet points of my conclusion. There cannot be democracy in Nigeria for as long as there is any child that will not be in school tomorrow because their parents cannot pay. You cannot have a democratic country in which children can't go to school because of school fees. We cannot talk of democracy in Nigeria for as long as there are still children anywhere in the land that have to depend on oil lamplight or the moonlight in order to read for their exams. You can't have democracy having meaning in a country like this where some school fees, some classrooms have no roof or children study under the trees. And you can have democracy where so many Nigerians go to bed without food. And all election results are announced 2 years before the election takes place. And you say you are having democracy. 2 years away, the election, but the result is announced today. Or when voters are chased away by thugs from election centers, you can't say you have a democracy. Similarly, you cannot have democracy when the election results are issued for voting centers where nobody voted. People didn't show up there to vote, but you have INEC result sheet verified, signed, stamped, and you say you are doing democracy. You cannot. And if we continue to buy votes as if we are buying tokens in the street bazaar, we cannot claim that we have democracy. Therefore, our citizens who are experiencing extreme poverty, our children who are witnessing or experiencing extreme deprivation, they are not hopeful. No matter what we politicians and intellectuals and media say, hope is not foisted. You don't impose hope. Instead, all these people who are suffering all these deprivations, I would call them midnight children. They are the midnight children. They are condemned to torment us forever and ever after. Thank you.
Let me say what I had wanted to say. That I wanted to bring a religious dimension to this whole discussion. Because we are in a country that is religious, whether we like it, whatever way you understand religion. And we all somehow believe in this almighty and merciful God, who is the creator of the entire universe. Let's not forget that this planet of ours is just a speck in the universe that God has created. The earth that we live in. I mean, the earth from here to Australia and to Honolulu is just a speck in the universe created. But somehow, in this speck called the earth, God also created human beings. And the human beings are the apex of his creation. And now, when we are talking of Nigeria, we think the whole world is just here. No. What we do know, both in Muslim, Islam religion and Christian religion, is that God provided for his creation. In fact, according to the scriptures, after God has created, he looked at his creation, and indeed, it was very good. And I'm sure it hasn't. God created well, and he has provided for all humanity. The whole human family are provided for. The great Gandhi said it already, that God has provided for the needs of every man under this earth. But he has not provided for their greed. If God has provided for the need of everybody in this world, he has certainly provided for the needs of every Nigerian. Because the discussion down to our house. This country, Nigeria, we have enough for all of us to. Therefore, poverty cannot be God's will for us. And therefore, poverty is not natural. And when we hear the word weaponizing poverty, I shudder. It means that poverty is not only a matter of mismanagement of resources, but that is a deliberate impoverization of the people for a purpose, to be able to control them. If that is what it is, then I will say poverty is not only mismanagement, it's not only criminal, it is even blasphemous.
Thank you very much, Cardinal. Thank you very much.
You are sabotaging God's intention for humanity. And that means it's not a matter for fasting. I'm a religious man. It's not a matter for prayer and fasting. It's a matter that those who have taken on the job of managing our affairs should wake up and manage the country in such a way that no child goes hungry.
Thank you very much, Cardinal. We'll come back to you. Let's now get to our Leonard Silk, who embodies excellence, professionalism, and mastery of law. Leonard Silk, our guests are very. Demographic rate of increase of our poor population is the highest in the world. The first thing is, do you agree with this assertion that the demographic rate of increase of our poor population is the highest in the world? Of course, my understanding is that whereas in other nations, China, for example, people are being lifted out of poverty. In India, they've made a lot of progress. However, in Nigeria, the inverse is the case. More Nigerians are being pushed to poverty. That's the core argument of our guest speaker, that more and more Nigerians daily are being pushed below the poverty line. That's one. So do you agree with that? And what are the peculiar features of Nigerian poverty? Now, the poverty in other places means they can still afford a meal. Here, our guest speaker is saying that ours is different. We don't even have access to education, access to quality health care. Do you agree with him? What is the different dimension of Nigerian poverty?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Peter Side. Is this working? Before I answer, in answering that question, again, I will reference what Cardinal said. It's not about me agreeing. It's a reality or not. It's a reality, and this has to be brought out. If I may go back a bit, even the title of the lecture, Democracy and the Republic of Poverty, it's provocative, and I think rightly so, because we need to wake up. When I say we, I mean governments, national and subnational. We need to wake up and smell the coffee. So perhaps it's time to stop being politically correct and call a spade a spade. There's poverty. I don't think anyone here doesn't know anybody who is not poor or even multidimensionally poor. So whether I agree or not with him, it's a fact. It's a fact that Nigerians are poor, and I think perhaps, like I said, it's time to stop being politically correct. The only thing is that in our climes at least, the politicians, leaders, yes, poverty has been weaponized by them. Poverty, desperation are used to get what they want, to be elected and re-elected. So that is something we should look at. If you look at the paper of the guest lecturer, very brilliant, by the way. He uses terms like aggressive poverty, migration into poverty. Every day, 50 Nigerians are entering that sphere. We're not lifting anybody out. You've mentioned China. Even India, that at one time was a poverty capital of the world. I think we've either overtaken or they've overtaken us. But they have just 6% of their population in extreme poverty. We have 33%, a full 1/3. Those are things that should bother us. I know you haven't asked this. I'm not sure if I'll have the opportunity to say it again. But there's a part of the lecturer's paper that I want to speak to. And in it he said the central question is, how do we observe the formal imperatives of our US-type presidential democracy and find the resources to grow an economy that caters for the myriad poor and the development of the country? My first question is, should we maintain our US-type presidential democracy? That is my question. Why do we have to maintain it? Is it working? Even for, I mean, he did emphasize the US type one. I remember a few years ago, many years ago, Hillary Clinton came to, I think it was Ghana, somewhere in West Africa, and she made a comment about democracy and how Africa needs to have strong institutions, not strong men. And I remember at that time, I disagreed with her vehemently. I thought she was patronizing and talking down at us. Well, as it turns out, I'm not gloating, that comment has not aged well in her own country right now. It hasn't aged well. So I want to ask what type of democracy we should be having. Is it like Singapore? I use Singapore as an example because shortly after I was born, Singapore was thrown out of the Malaysian Federation. It had nothing. It was behind us. It wasn't anywhere near Nigeria in terms of GDP. I remember my mother went there in the mid-70s and she came back waxing lyrical. Because of that, I visited Singapore. In the space of 15 years, I think I went about 7 times. My first trip, I was taken around by her friend, a professor at a university there. And she would tell me, oh, this place was a slum before. Oh, this place, they used to sell fried food on the road, right in the center of the road. And the whole place was so developed. So is it the US-style democracy we need? Or a benign democracy, or benign dictatorship? I know this may get some hackles up, but it's the truth. Because look at Singapore today.
Thank you very, very much.
Why, and I always say this, I love talking to youth wherever I go in this country, but I see them as a picture of me when I was much younger. And I tell them, ladies and gentlemen, the state that Nigeria is in today, we bore the pregnancy and gave birth to what Nigeria is today. All of us. And in psychiatry, there's this thing you call insight. If a person has a psychiatric problem and he says, he agrees he has a psychiatric problem, his prognosis is much better than a person who is in denial. So we have to accept we bore the pregnancy and gave birth to the mess that Nigeria is today. All of us. Why am I in this? People say there is an old pathologist, German pathologist, that said medicine is a social science, but politics is medicine on a larger scale. All we are seeing in hospitals, we see the sufferings of our people every day. Every day. We see hunger, we see death, we see inequity, and we're here in Abuja talking the Abuja talk. I go back home and I sit down in front of our decali and say, what has changed in the 65 years of my life, in the lives of our people? How much? The 5 commonest killers of children in the tropics are 5. Malaria, diarrheal diseases, pneumonia, malnutrition, and vaccine preventable diseases. None of these require a doctor. All of these are social problems. All of them. All of them. So we went to America, we copied. We came here and pasted. There is a saying, is if you do not know how to paste, do not copy. Is this for us? And how are we going to domesticate it to our resources and to our people? We are here because we love this country and we love it more than life itself. This country has given us more than we can ever give back. We, the children of the poor and the children of the rich, line up and got Bulgaria and Zaria. The primary schools we went to, the village primary schools we went to, and secondary schools, we went into the world and competed favorably. And some of the best centers in the world. In my household, there are 3 people who always pray for at the end of each of our 5 daily prayers. Our parents departed because they raised us all well. They taught us the values of honesty, dedication, and respect for fellow human beings. Secondly, our teachers, both Islamic and modern. They taught us very well. But thirdly, most importantly, leaders of our time. They invested in us. They invested in us. In the village primary school, secondary school, we went into the world and competed favorably. And unless we that now are the leaders, accept that it is our failing and do the right thing, we'll continue to go around this circle. Let me give you just very brief thing. I remember watching a clip of His Royal Highness, the Emir of Kano. He was standing in, dropping some royal tears. I was very touched. Why? He was narrating the story of a woman that came to his palace. And many people come to the palaces of our traditional rulers and our clergy. They don't go to the governor's mansions. This woman went to the hospital with her child. Written medication. She didn't have the money to pay. And they all come to the palace. She was waiting for her turn. Before her turn came to see the emir had a scream. A woman screamed and there was commotion. What happened? This poor child, she came to get no more than $3,000 from the emir, died on her back before she could see him. No more than 3,000. We see that all across this country. All across this country. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why I'm in this. We see the sufferings of our people. We know what this country has given us. We know what this country can give our people. Thank you very much.
Of people should sit down and decide to impoverish the people for their political gain. I'm just trying to understand, is that possible? And what do they gain from that? Or is it the devil? I don't know. But normally, according to the church that I belong, politics is supposed to be a sacred engagement that people who are qualified go into, not minding their personal interests, but so as to manage the society in a good way, for the good of the people and to the glory of Almighty God. In other words, you don't go into politics to make money for yourself. You don't go into politics to impoverish people, weaponize poverty. So I still cannot understand that. As for electoral election not working well, I think we all know the reason why now. We all know the reason why. in my own understanding, the reason is because those who control the electoral process, those who are in government, do not really want us to be the ones to choose who our rulers will be. The whole question of we want free and fair election, that the people who aspire to office should sit down quietly in their homes on election day and wait for the results to come to know whether the people want them or not. If that is not what our political culture is, then we are not even thinking of democracy. We are not even thinking of democracy. Professor Amuta said, when you impoverish people so much, they have now arrived at the situation where they don't even believe, they don't think it is worth their while leaving the comfort of their homes to go and vote. So they stay at home after collecting stomach infrastructure. But is that how to build a great nation in the year 2025? Democracy is not a magic, which is why you have so many types of it, including the illiberal democracy, which is purely the dictatorship, or one-party democracy, which is purely the dictatorship. They all call themselves democracy. For me, I really stop. I don't worry too much whether you call it democracy or not. What I ask is there good governance? Are people having justice done to them? Can a poor child not die on the back of her mother? That's what it's all about. If whatever you do and that doesn't happen, we are not serious.
Thank you very much. Just before that values patriotic and courageous leadership, or are we just interested in talk show? I just got this message and I was touched. Maybe I may have to repeat it one more time. As we celebrate the right honorable Chimekerotimi Amechi, we must also confront a deeper question his example of patriotism and courage poses to all of us. Are we building a nation that values patriotic and courageous leadership as he symbolized, or we're just interested in talk show? Food for thought. Let us see. Dr. Amuda made a point.
Thank you for that question. Yes, of course, there's a link. I mean, if you look at developed countries and their rate of poverty, which is minimal, they don't have these sorts of security issues. So when we have a country that has overtaken Sudan, we've overtaken Sudan of all countries, it's a nation that's at war in terms of the numbers of malnourished children who go to bed hungry. So those are issues. Of course, there's a link between that and what we see all around us. Banditry, kidnappings, terrorism, all sorts of things. It's related. And for me, we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder. You know, there's a joke that says if you push a Nigerian to the wall, he will go through the wall. But as we've seen recently, it's not so. It's not so. If you push people far enough or hard enough, they will react. I could go back to the French Revolution, I could go back to history, but right here we've all experienced what happened during NSARS. It began as a rebellion against police brutality, but look what it morphed into. Look how many people joined this and then made it into something else. Buildings were burnt down, people were killed. So there's a direct relationship. Question, I forget.
And how can we solve this problem?
I think we know what to do. You mentioned talk shop. We've had so many talk shops in this country. We have one every day, one every week. Our leaders, our governments, they know what to do. If they're not ready to do it, maybe it will be done for them, whether by force or not by force, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. That's the stage we've gotten to now. So I think it's in the enlightened self-interest of governments national and sub-national, to do what they ought to do. I'm not going to sit here pontificating about free basic education, health care, shelter, right to sanitation. No, we know what to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Prof, our learned silk cannot claim to, she's insecurity everywhere, but it's your own lived experience. You encounter insecurity every day. So I'll take you back to the same question. As a man who has traversed the northwestern, northeastern, north central part of the country, and you've seen the effect of insecurity in any way. By the way, no society can develop if the society is not safe and secure, if there's no rule of law, where there's no order. Rule of law is not necessarily about democracy. What is your take about this issue of poverty and insecurity? And in 3-4 words, how can we solve this problem of insecurity where poverty is a driver? We clearly know that there appears to be a consensus from all who have said here that poverty is the driver of insecurity, is the facilitator of insecurity. How can we solve this problem of insecurity?
Yeah,
We've tried kinetic methods.
Good. I mean, and I always say, the two twin evils that are security problems, corruption and bad governance. End of story. Go no further. Go no further. Corruption and bad governance. And I see the frustration of our military. We are bringing them to clean up the mess of politicians. There's so much they can do. A lot of these things are social problems. Kinetic is just about 10%, if that. 90% of that is social problems. People that have no opportunities, nothing to do, hunger and everything, they pick up arms, they are now the kings. We are all shaking before them. If we do not take care of corruption and insecurity and realize 90% of our insecurity are social problems and keep throwing money and resources and money onto the kinetic arm, we will never get there. Seriously. We all grew up in a country that was much poorer than it is today. Much poorer than it was today.
It's a great honor for me to have been invited to this event and to have the opportunity to say a few words. And let me begin on a personal note by congratulating Governor Amechi on achieving this milestone. He's a friend I've known from his days as Governor of Rivers. I would like to wish you happy celebrations and many, many more years of service to our country. Well, since the professor has decided to call me out, the reality about poverty in Nigeria is that many of the elite really do not even know what poverty is. But the example the professor gave was a very potent example. In all my life as an economist, as a banker, as a governor of the central bank, I looked at these numbers.